we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everyone, welcome to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time listening, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, please like and subscribe. Tell a friend. We'll double the podcast overnight. If you ever want to reach out to me, please hit me up on our Twitter or Instagram at the Bigmark Pod and at the Bigmark Podcast. Go check us out on our Patreon if you want to support the podcast. Patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. And again, thank you so much for listening. I always appreciate everyone's support, and I love all the great feedback that I get from all these episodes. Thanks, Pops and Andrea, for the new shirt. If anyone's been watching closely, all you Bigmark podcast fans, I've had a different shirt on basically every episode. I have fucked up, and I did miss one. So anyone with a keen eye, maybe you've caught that, maybe you haven't, and now I'm pointing it out, but who cares? Thank you so much for the shirts in my birthday package. I loved everything in there. Great cups and everything. And, again, much appreciated. It was a great birthday, and it was great to see you guys. And, it's funny, every birthday I throw up this post on Facebook, right? Cause everyone writes on your wall for your birthday on Facebook and says shit and messages, and it's so great, and it's always amazing. It's always hard to go through everything. So, people like to kind of post up a generic kind of, hey, thanks for all the birthday wishes thing. So I always like to kind of spice things up, and I post this little excerpt from Seinfeld, and it's a scene. If anyone's a big fan of Seinfeld, it's the scene where George Costanza met this girl who thinks he's really funny, so he convinces Jerry to pretend he's not funny. Obviously, he's a professional comedian, but convinces Jerry to not be funny around his girlfriend, and Jerry, gives out, it's on, like, they go out to dinner on his birthday, and he gives this solemn speech about there's no such thing as a happy birthday, and, every year that we grow, or every year that goes by, we realize how little we grow. Anyway, it's depressing, but it's funny in the context of the show, and anyone who knows Seinfeld always gets it, but it's always about like 50% of people get it and think it's funny, and then 50% of people are like, Mark, are you all right? So it's kind of funny, but I do it every year, and it basically gets the same response every year, so I'm doing it till everyone gets it. But anyway, again, thanks for everybody and all the birthday wishes and everything. But today we're going to get into a cool subject. I hope it matches the glasses today. Hopefully, I'm channeling some homeless pimp vibes. Shout out Chrissy Chaos and Hey Babe and all those podcasts that you do. If anyone doesn't know any of those, go check those out. They're sweet podcasts, and their producer basically looks exactly like I do right now with short hair. But I wanted to get a little funky because we're going to get a little bit funky today and talk about Area 51. You're probably going to see this. You probably, maybe you clicked on this video and saw the title. And I'm not going to get all Tom DeLonge on you today. I'm not going to go wild in UFOs. Today's going to be a little bit more actual info about the actual military base that is Area 51. Of course, talking about this stuff, I can't help but bring up some stuff that would be considered conspiracy theories or UFO stories or whatever you want to call it. And it's interesting, and I'll get into this later too. It's interesting how we kind of denounce UFO stories, and anyone who talks about it just is a kook and crazy, and just saw it in their dreams and they were sleepwalking, or who knows, right? But to think that in this grand universe that exists, that we know of, this physical universe out there with all the stars and planets, it's hard to really convince ourselves that we are the only intelligent life forms out there. It's extremely hard, again, not to get too far into alien stuff, but it's a crazy distance to travel, but it's not impossible. And there's ways in physics that we are just starting to learn here on Earth, that we can theoretically think about how we might travel kind of space time, so to speak. But there could be civilizations, infinite civilizations out there that have figured it out and can do, interstellar travel, and potentially have visited our planet. And therefore may have crashed here, may have left remnants, may have willingly left things too, right? Like, you never know. In a lot of ancient kind of megalithic sites, as Graham Hancock would put it, Egypt and places like that, there's, writings and Aztec lore and stuff like that of beings coming down and kind of giving them things, and who knows exactly what that is, right? But again, talking about Area 51, you kind of can't help but go down the rabbit hole a little bit, but that's not what we're here to do today. Again, going to kind of talk a little bit more about, obviously everyone has heard of Area 51. If you haven't, well, I'm here to tell you, was, a large area, but not a significantly large area, with several buildings built in the southern Nevada desert, as a U.S. Air Force military base. From 1955 to 2013, the U.S. government actually denied its entire existence. It was deemed completely top secret, and it was never mentioned by name by the U.S. government again until 2013. There was a CIA document that was released, Freedom of Information Act, things like that. Obviously, the problem is, for a long time, people were able to, in the surrounding area around Area 51, they were able to see lights and hear sounds coming from the area, so they obviously knew something was going on. Slowly but surely, the U.S. government kind of bought all the area around it, so it's hard to even approach some of this shit by accident. And then there's a crazy no-fly zone. Talk about a no-fly zone. In November 1954... they actually launched the U.S. Air Force launched Project Aquatone, which was a joint effort by Lockheed, which was a weapons manufacturer, the U.S. Air Force, and the CIA, to create new planes to spy on the USSR and the Soviet Union. Basically, they needed to work in secret, so they created Area 51 in a remote location in Nevada. It was fairly close to a nuclear test site, so it was already kind of restricted, and it's not like people were going to want to show up there anyway. And to kind of bring more scientists and military personnel there, it was nicknamed Paradise Ranch, which was maybe just a little bit of kind of a lie to get people there. But essentially all the people that were there were involved with building the U-2 plane. If you're watching on YouTube here, I'll show a little picture of it and you can check it out. It's at the time was the highest flying plane. So in the 1950s, commercial flights flew around 20,000 feet. So they were pretty high. The military flew about 40,000 feet just to kind of avoid that and stay a little bit further away from the ground. The U-2 could actually get up to 70,000 feet. So it was flying, almost twice as high as any military plane was even able to go. So other commercial pilots would see these planes being tested, and they were so blown away by the altitude and how high it was going, how fast it was going, they thought it had to be from another planet. They were unidentified flying objects in a way that they basically said that they must be from another world because they just don't even understand what they're seeing. It's kind of that's basically what kind of perpetuated the whole idea that there was alien shit kind of coming from Area 51. Probably is that right off the bat, anything coming from there, they just assumed was alien tech because, and you know what? There's a good chance that they might have been reverse engineering something if they found it that was potentially extraterrestrial. But essentially, this stuff was just so advanced that anyone that could see it, and it's not like this never happened before. People were getting hit by cars all the time and trains and shit when they first came out because they never been around. At the time they had never been around anything that could move that fast, so they couldn't judge it, and they wouldn't get out of the way in time. Shit like that. Like, there has been normal technology that humans have created that have blown people away. Happens to this day, So anyway, that could have been the first kind of, or that essentially is like the first kind of connection of, UFOs at least. And again, UFOs just means unidentified flying object. It doesn't necessarily imply that it's alien craft, but what can you do? Even though the commercial pilots were seeing this and saying this, the government essentially couldn't openly admit that they were running these tests. So they did actually have to lie about it, and they basically just said, they're natural phenomena, high altitude weather testing experiments, shit like that. So it's understandable that people think this shit is fishy, right? It's understandable that people think, maybe there's more to the story because the government is clearly lying about this shit, right? So, but essentially they have to try and keep it top secret. I mean, there's spies involved anyway. Someone's going to try and find out, but they don't want to openly admit, oh yeah, we're just testing a new spy plane to go look at the Soviets, and all the Soviets have to do is just turn their TV on, and that's all they have to do. So, the times had to, the ends justified the means, I guess. But again, this is what perpetuates these notions that are, pretty extreme. On May 1st, 1960, the USSR actually shot down a U-2 plane. They recovered the plane intact and captured the pilot. So the Soviet Union had all the technology that the US was working on at the time. Obviously, this makes the U-2 plane obsolete. So basically, this forced the US to push the innovation of their spy planes, obviously bigger, higher, faster, as the US do. And it made them, and they came up with the A-12 ox cart. I'll show a picture here again on YouTube here, but essentially it looks like a flying saucer. It could go up to 80,000 feet, and up to Mach 3, which was 3 times the speed of sound, which was unheard of at the time. And again, it had that circular fuselage. Essentially, it's like the OG UFO. It more or less looks like, a picture UFO, and that's essentially what this thing looks like. And it was an incredible leap in technology in such a short time. Now, in my research, they were kind of implying that, this incredible leap was from them reversing alien technology, or they found something all of a sudden, or they made a breakthrough in their reverse engineering process that all of a sudden they could create these new, newfangled planes. I guess that's highly plausible, but another thing too that we can look at is like, human beings, when they're pushed to a certain point and that's all they have to do, that's all they can think about, they're paid to do it, they can live, breathe, and think about an idea, are capable of amazing things. Basically, the only thing that's holding us back from doing anything at any point are like distractions in life and distractions, in living and having to work and pay money and pay rent and earn money and pay rent and do all that shit, right? So it's like, if you're literally living at the scientific facility and you're a scientist and that's your job and you're provided and you can eat and you can sleep, but every other hour that you're available, you're thinking on this project, it's amazing what can be done. And trial and error too. Like, again, this literally Area 51 is a test site. Who knows how many shits were fucking destroyed before, and I'll get into that later. Or sorry, I'll get there. The A-12 ran for a handful of missions from 1964 to 1968 before they scrapped the project. But it was essentially the precursor for the SR-71 Blackbird, which is the fastest manned flight. In 1976, it went 3,529 kilometers an hour, and it still holds that record to this day. And it was tested at Area 51. So I'll show another picture here. Everyone knows exactly what this plane looks like. I guess I was a little bit of a plane nerd as a kid, because I did a day camp up at the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum, which is here in Hamilton, Ontario, for anyone who'd love to go see some cool ass old planes that were all essentially fighter planes, have fucking guns and shit. It's pretty badass. I did like a day camp there for a week or whatever, and went, and it was pretty fun. You got to like look at planes and learn how they work and shit, and by the end of it, got to go up in a plane, and it was like a little Cessna 4-seater. It basically felt like a flying car. And at that point, you know, it's super fun. You're not even afraid. I was probably like 7, I want to say. And I was wearing a hat. I'm sitting in the back seat, and the pilot's taking us up in the air, and he goes, "Yo, hey Mark, take your hat off and hold it in your hand." So I'm holding my hat in my hand, just kind of right in my lap kind of thing. And all of a sudden, the pilot stalls the engine, you know, in a safe way, but he stalls the plane, and we start to kind of fall in the air. And my hat just levitates completely out of my hand. It was the craziest thing. I felt myself come, like my seatbelt got tighter. I got like came off the seat. We basically went completely weightless for a while. And it was a really, really interesting feeling. But anyway, I've always kind of had a soft spot for cool planes ever since that time. And the SR-71 Blackbird is a badass plane. I used to have a little model of it, or I think I still do at my mom's. Again, it was tested at Area 51, so people knew about these planes. They knew that they were being created, but again, the testing was always very secretive. Again, since people knew that the fastest plane in the world came from Area 51, all that publicity drew more attention to Area 51. But still, the government kept denying its existence. Area 51 is arguably the most highly classified military facility in the U.S. And it's basically the same small layout since the 1950s or so, but millions of acres of restricted airspace. So again, you know, the U.S. owns most of the area surrounding the base, so it's hard to even wander up to it. And again, people knew that there was stuff going on here, but the U.S. just kept denying, deny till you die, I guess. And before satellite imaging, the U.S. government actually were able to erase Area 51 from all the maps produced at the time. So any map, that was like hand drawn or whatever they used to do back then was completely, like Area 51 was just not even on the map, and the road that led up to it too. So super, super wild. Like again, painstaking efforts to hide this thing. In 1974, a U.S. satellite that was like basically creating a map of the entire world accidentally took a picture of Area 51, and it was the only place on Earth it couldn't take a picture of. So I guess it was confiscated or had to be changed. Not sure. Again, it's funny because Area 51 isn't, there's not much to see really from the sky anyway of the actual compound, and a lot of people think that some of the base might actually be underground. Again, like I said before, that the U.S. government didn't really go to any lengths to hide the construction of the planes that were built in Burbank, California at Lockheed Martin. They went over and above to hide the flight tests themselves. So really, really interesting that they got so uptight about the discovery and the photography of Area 51. Obviously, again, they want to hide things in general, but there's a possibility that this was a form of distraction from another adjacent base where all the real stuff went down potentially. Even after the spy planes were made obsolete by satellite imaging, the U.S. government continued to deny Area 51's existence until that CIA document was released in 2013. The details of that document were only it was only the happenings basically around Area 51 until about 1968. So it was only basically until the A-12 was no longer was no longer used in missions. So from 1968 to 2013, they still didn't release that information. They may never release that information. In June 1982, the F-117 Nighthawk, which is a sick-ass plane, I'll show it again on YouTube if anyone wants to see it, it's the first functional stealth fighter, and it was basically practically invisible to radar. This is, when you look at this plane, you kind of go, okay, I understand why people think that they were reverse engineering alien craft, because how did anyone even figure this out? But again, it's basically built to avoid radar, so there's a lot of right angles and strange ways that it's going to bounce off that signal, because basically radar works off a wave, and if you can disperse that wave and not allow it to return back to its origin, radar doesn't work. During the 80s, Area 51 essentially became the hub of stealth plane tech. Again, everyone knew that that's what was being tested around there. People, although you couldn't really get close, the surrounding area, people were still coming, visiting, and kind of plane watching, so to speak. So everyone knew that all this stealth tech was going on. And again, the U.S. was still denying it. Crazy shit. And for that entire decade, they basically burned everything. And I literally mean everything. Materials, fucking tools, literally anything that was used to build these stealth planes was literally put in pits and burned. Now, you might be thinking, that can't be good for the environment. Well, no shit. It definitely is not. Some of the workers actually died as a direct result from these burn piles sucking in fumes, which is brutes magoots. The employees were actually denied PPE, personal protection equipment. Obviously, everyone knows what that means from COVID, due to budgetary issues, and which is fucking crazy. It's the bloody U.S. military, and they can't provide these guys any protection. It's very, very strange. Maybe they just hoped they were going to die anyway. So obviously these people took the U.S. military to court because they're like, this is brutal. You guys basically killed my family. And in court, the U.S. government actually prevented the EPA from releasing any documents about the environmental impact of the findings from Area 51. And that was Bill Clinton himself and every president since. There's 4 times a year where they have the option to sign or not sign this document saying don't release the Area 51 EPA results. 4 times every year, and every president since Bill Clinton has signed this document. So they don't want that fucking EPA document released. I don't know what the fuck that's about. I mean, it's strange because even if we knew what, it's just going to tell us what chemicals are out there. It's not going to say, oh, aluminum, fucking uranium, alien dick. Like, what's gonna say? You know what I mean? Like, it's so weird. So still to this day, I guess Trumpists did it, and even fucking Biden probably saw it and said, nope, don't release that shit. Anyway, the CIA recently released some more shit about UFOs and stuff in Area 51, but they've been keeping it close to the vest. They also classified any documents that would allow the employees' widows to get any compensation, basically only under the guise of national security. So essentially these families lost loved ones because the U.S. government doesn't even want to admit that Area 51 was going at that time, or whatever they don't want to do. So it's fucking bad news, bears. The popularity of Area 51 continued to grow. 1988, a Soviet satellite actually took a picture of Area 51. And again, no one really freaked out. It wasn't really much to see from the air anyway. Again, leading back, like I said, to the possibility that the majority of the base is underground. But despite that, interest continued to grow. And like I said, in the surrounding areas, the nearest town of Rachel, Nevada, embraced the ET culture, the classic kind of Roswell alien stuff, all that kitsch. They took advantage of the tourism, opening bars like named the Little Alien, and and, selling T-shirts and tchotchkes and souvenirs. But the info that has been released about Area 51, including the 2013 CIA report, only mentions events up to the 1980s. And again, the government probably will never release any info about Area 51. And again, it's strange because is it national security or is it something else, right? There's a few kind of prevailing theories, so to speak, and the oldest one being the potential crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. A rancher found strange material on his land, and the U.S. Air Force initially called it remnants of a UFO, but later redacted that statement. And the kind of theory from that is that the remnants of that crash might have been brought to Area 51, and that's kind of what was built around. It was all built around that whatever remnants they found, or there might actually be actual alien remains. There might be a body of an alien potentially at Area 51. That's the oldest. That's kind of the largest, most cliche one. Obviously, I mentioned it a few times. The reverse engineering of kind of alien technology for our own tech, stealth, not from everything from stealth planes to, microwave cell phones, all this space age technology, right? Like, I mean, again, we could probably have a whole other podcast talking about, the logarithmic kind of evolution, the exponential growth of human technology, kind of from like the Industrial Revolution and all the way up till now. Things are kind of evolving at an exponential rate. And was that just the natural course of things? Is that how humans would have just naturally got to this point? Or again, did we unlock some things, with some of this remnants at Area 51, and then eventually that filtered through the military and got to us, right? Developing technology that's, way ahead of current technology, that essentially would blow people's minds. That's another kind of theory of what's going down at Area 51. Like I said, when they had that U-2 in the sky, at 70,000 feet or whatever, all these other pilots were tripping balls going, I don't even know what this thing is. I've never seen this thing in my life. It's got to be from another world. I don't know what country, or it's got to be from another planet. That's how friggin' crazy it is. And again, the government wants to keep it quiet and not just let it out and let their enemies potentially know what they're doing too. And essentially anything we see right now in the consumer sector, from frickin' video cameras to LEDs to all this shit, was kind of tested or first developed for the military sector, because that's where the money is, right? If you're a scientist or you're an inventor or whatever, and you're inventing stuff, if you sell it to the military, you're going to make a lot of money. Eventually someone's going to reinvent it, or yourself is going to eventually reinvent things that is going to be more consumer based once the newest thing is then invented for the military to take over, right? So we kind of get the hand-me-downs, so to speak, technology-wise, from the military. One of the big things that I did want to mention in this one, which does kind of lead us again down that conspiracy rabbit hole a little bit, and again, this is as far as we're gonna go. It's the story of Bob Lazar. Now Bob Lazar worked at Area 51, actually in Area S4, which is about 15 miles south of Area 51. He was an engineer and a scientist, and he developed rocket technology and nuclear weapons at Los Alamos Labs, which is a national laboratory where essentially the Manhattan Project went down. Bob was recruited to work on reverse engineering an alien craft at Area S4. Again, this is where he said these alien crafts were stored. When he was first recruited, he wasn't told it was Area 51. when he first joined the project, and things started to get weird when Bob first saw the flying saucers, and he basically just thought that they were just, advanced fighters. He didn't really think too much of it when he first saw those again, it's much like the A-12, but he said it looked different, but he just thought, again, it was just an advanced new jet fighter. And again, things are so compartmentalized that he's not really told the whole story at any point. But again, things got even weirder when he was kind of shown the components of the craft. So what was going on the inside is actually what blew him away. And they demonstrated this little reactor, as they call it, working. And when he saw this thing working, he knew it, wasn't of this planet. The reactor, it's about the size and shape of a basketball on a metal plate. And when they turned it on, which it's kind of foggy how they actually turned it on. Sometimes I guess they would like juice it with some electricity, even though he said there's no wires or anything in the thing. But he said once you put the lid on it, that's when it starts to work. It's very strange. But it would actually create a gravitational field. So this is hard for anyone to wrap their heads around because, again, this is not technology that we've ever had on Earth. We do not have the power to actually create a gravitational field. Essentially, meaning Bob went to try and touch that sphere, that basketball-shaped sphere, but his hand was repelled, kind of like two poles of a magnet being pushed together. So the gravity was like, as we were being held down to the planet, he was being repelled, kind of in the opposite fashion from this basketball thing. Basically, Bob's entire project was part of a larger, like I mentioned, a compartmentalized project that was trying to back engineer the alien crafts. And they did come out and tell Bob in a briefing that they believed that the crafts were from the star cluster Zeta Reticuli, or the nearest star system Zeta Reticuli. Again, Bob has little info to go on, but it's a really compelling story. I suggest you kind of go out and look at it more, but I only brought it up because them reverse engineering a craft that may or may not have, crashed here. He says it could have crashed years ago. There's a chance that he says that there were several crafts. There was a chance that one was found in an archaeological dig. So it could have been here thousands of years ago. Again, everything's a little bit funky because, again, he wasn't really given a lot of info. But I suggest, if you're listening to the podcast this far in, go check him out. Listen to his whole story. He does a really good interview on Joe Rogan's podcast. And yeah, I mean, if he's lying, it's a pretty elaborate lie, and he's been telling the story for years. And back in the late 80s when he first came out and told the story, it kind of really reignited that whole alien culture and everyone being really interested in aliens and stuff. Look at Men in Black came out and everyone dug it. But I think kind of the nuts and bolts of this whole story, even everything that we do know about Area 51, I think it really highlights people's fascination anyway for the unknown. I think obviously there's fear that exists in the unknown. There's curiosity that exists in the unknown. There's the concept of there's the abyss there, that if you stare long enough into the abyss, that the abyss stares back at you. And there's something that, the human mind can't really just handle, no info, right? So it starts to create something. It doesn't like having no input. It craves input. And I think when we have something like this, where there's so much unknown and there's so much involved with not allowing people to know what is happening and keeping things confidential and top secret for good reason. Again, the U.S. government couldn't just come out and say, hey, we got these new planes we're testing to go and spy at the Soviets, like I mentioned. So it's like, out of necessity, lies had to be told, but then it leads to, people really using their imaginations and kind of going, who knows what's going on in there, man? They got aliens up in there, brother. Who knows, right? So, and there's that whole storming Area 51 that was like some bullshit and like 10 people showed up, which is classic. But yeah, you know, it's an area where, again, it might even be a whole fake out. It might not even be where the real shit goes down. If in fact, to me, that makes more sense. You know, build a couple small buildings in the middle of a dirt patch, restrict the hell out of it. All you have to say is you can't go here. There's not like there's fences and shit and there's fences in the sky. Literally all that takes is saying, hey, you're not allowed to fly in this area that we designate. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, something's going down in there. Every spy in every world is trying to friggin' figure out how to get into Area 51. Meanwhile, down the road, they're fucking looking at crazy flying basketballs. I don't know what's going on. But I think, again, you know, the other main point too is kind of, you know, the power of human innovation. I think when, you know, I touched on it earlier, when you really do focus and put yourself in a scenario where that's all you think about, and you get on an idea and you follow it to its absolute finish, humans are able to do amazing things. And I think we all have that kind of power within us. And if we are able to devote ourselves completely to something and really push ourselves and really try and filter out all those excess distractions that exist in our life, you know, I think that we're capable of amazing things, so much so that people are going to think it's from a whole other planet. And that's the mark of true innovation, that people don't even know what the fuck is happening. Again, if you went back in time and even showed a caveman a fucking Bic lighter, his friggin' mind, his feeble mind would blow up, or he'd attack you with his log or whatever. He'd come at you. So people don't know what they don't know, and they're only ready for something once they're ready. And you know, there's things that have come out before their time and people didn't get it. So innovation's a bitch. And you know, it's something that if you do devote yourself to completely, you can create something that's real. And if you have the perfect timing, and even if you don't have the perfect timing, eventually someone's going to give you the credit. You know, we gave Leonardo DiCap. We gave him fucking shit for inventing the fucking Oscars. I don't know what I'm talking about. Leonardo da Vinci, we gave him mad credit for doing tanks and crazy working on helicopters and shit. Yeah, he didn't figure it out, but he was working on it. So again, innovators, people who are out there building shit, artists, anyone who's doing something and doing it from their heart and passionate about advancing and creating new things for people to look at and push the human race forward. God bless you. Keep doing what you're doing. I love you. If you're listening, keep listening. Thank you again for bearing with me. I love you. If you want to check out more, you know, check out our other episodes. Spread the word. Tell your friends. Like and subscribe. You know, hit the bell on YouTube so you know when the next fucking episode comes down. You know, hit me up on Twitter at the Bigmark Pod. Hit me up on Instagram at the Bigmark Podcast. Again, thank you so much for listening. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. I love you all. I go in peace. We come in peace. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.